And now, another exciting episode in the adventures of Outdoor Journal Radio.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again, Outdoor Journal Radio, the podcast. I'm Angela Boyle. He is Peter Bowman. As usual, Vova, Nick, and Dean, and the other parts of the room that we can't show you.
Come on now.
Apparently.
Yeah, I wonder why we can't show
We have once.
We have once.
Yeah.
And then we got such bad reviews on that
Yeah,
one.
we cut away to Dean, and they were kind of feared of him.
cut
They
it.
looked at he's like a nasty dude. He's going to beat me up, that guy.
Welcome to the program. What a wonderful episode we have coming for you. Recently, the internet has been abuzz about.
That's good. A buzz. That's
very
clever. Very clever.
About this whole issue of barotrauma and how deep is, too deep to be fishing for fish. And should we just stop fishing deep fish altogether? If we know for a fact the barotrauma is caused by bringing fish in, and let's just, for argument's sake, because there is no real set number at this point, we have speculations on what it should be, but let's just say it's 30 feet for the sake of argument.
It's a good number.
If they say that fish that are brought in from deeper than 30 feet, the mortality rate is just not acceptable, and to me, mortality rate at that point, it could be 1%. That's still probably not acceptable, because it means that we as anglers are going to knowingly try and catch a fish that has a chance of dying, which that in itself,
it don't make much sense.
It don't make much sense. If we're into catch and release, now if we're fishing for a feed of walleye, for example, for a shore lunch, and the only place we can get them is 30 feet, but you're going to consume those 5 or 6 fish, then have at it.
Yeah, but again, see that one right there, we could catch a 11-pounder accidentally.
And you
then all of a
say,
sudden,
why?
Uh-oh.
And you say, why?
So.
And you say, why would I want to do that if I know it could die?
And new listeners, anybody that's new to this or doesn't know a whole lot about barotrauma, just look it up quickly before you listen to this, or put it on pause and look up barotrauma, and you'll see in fish, you'll see what we're going to be talking about today. So
a noted expert will be joining us later on. You may know him from previous Outdoor Journal episodes. He was certainly on our radio show for a number of years. We may have done television work with him. His name is Dr. Stephen J. Cooke. He'll be joining us a little bit later on if you want an idea of his credentials, because the whole scientific community right now is being questioned as to their validity when it comes to doing research and whatnot. If there's any question about Dr. Cooke's credentials, he's a biology professor at Carleton University. He's published more than 700 peer-reviewed papers. Now, peer-reviewed paper is when these guys do a study. That study could be a month long, could be a year long. They might do 7 studies in conjunction with one. But the bottom line is, when that study is done and finished and they have written up their conclusion, it needs to go to a bank of scientists that then have a chance to review it and say, Stephen, I don't know, man.
This, that, and the
cross
other.
Cross that out.
That's good.
I don't like that. And
it's like me script writing. I got to go to
like
Dean, and then I got to go to you after that. It's like it's changed 100% by the time the audience gets it.
Right. So peer review work means that it has gone under scrutiny beyond belief. When it is finally put out there, it's the real deal. I could not do that. I could not. If Peter and I decided to do a study on the mortality rate of the American eel when we capture it in New Brunswick in the spring of the year, and we decided, because we went out and fished for a day, that, okay, all right, everybody, listen up. We have decided that here's the truth now. Forget the studies, forget the science, forget all that.
Bunch of bullshit.
Bunch of bullshit.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
That's right. Forget all that. We now are the Messiah. We are the Word, man. You got to listen up, because we went out and fished today, and we learned more in that short period of time than all the scientists in the world know. And so here's the truth about
We're pretty smart, eh, Ange?
American eels.
We're
We're
intelligent
geniuses.
Guys, eh? Yep.
So the program is going to be a lot about that today because recently on the internet, YouTubers, folks are starting to come out and question the science that goes behind fish and wildlife management. And man, we cannot afford for this to happen without getting the scientists involved in discussion. And that's what we're doing today. We have one of the greatest scientists of our time in the fisheries business to talk to us about that. So you don't want to miss it, for sure.
Good stuff.
All right, moving on. What do we got today, Mr. Bowman?
Well, we got, of course, the new Fishing Canada season is going really strong right now. So
we know a
right
thing or two about that.
We know a thing or two about that, but we always take recommendations and criticism, right? We can take some constructive criticism every now and then. That's a bunch of bullshit. Don't do that anymore.
That's a bunch of bullshit.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Does he get paid like not to push the button anymore?
Well, he does a lot of writing. I get to see him. You're not.
Notes.
I got a good angle on. He takes notes
seeing,
that he's taking notes while he's maybe he's not taking notes. Maybe he's farting around and doing
is
nothing.
Is he double
to do with
dipping
it,
then, or what? Is he not getting paid for this part of the job, or is
yeah,
taking notes on the show.
If his notes are for the show,
on this show.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm the editor as well, right? I don't just sit here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel! Look at you. Look at him go. Did you ever think that one day?
Well,
did you ever think that one day? Seriously, think back now to your first exposure to the Fishing Canada brand. You were but I'm sure, a toddler at best.
Yes, for sure. I remember it.
You remember it?
Yep.
Okay. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that you would be sitting here one day,
here we go,
right here, right now, communicating with us while we're doing our thing?
My mom did.
Your mom predicted it?
My mom predicted it.
And she just kept
I'm still in shock.
putting it in his head, and so he's kind of not the biggest surprise in his life.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
God bless your mom.
Yeah.
I love you, Mom. Where were we?
The Fishing Canada show, shop.fishingcanada.com. Quickly, just if you want any merch like my Fishing Canada quarter zip and oranges.
By the way, you look very handsome in that. I don't know that I've told you.
How do I look? I look very Gino. I walked in today.
Well, it's like curly chest hair.
Maybe a little further. I don't know if I did, but no shirt underneath
there. You're missing the gold chain.
And Nick says, hey, you look very Gino today.
Now, you see, we're not, that sounds in itself, that's so 80s. Making that comment.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even acceptable today. I mean, is it?
I don't know.
If you're Italian.
It's good, isn't it?
Well, no.
You can say it if you're Italian, can't you?
Nick's Italian.
Yeah, see, I have problems with that too. And don't get me started with that. I believe ethnic slurs, if
is that a slur?
Well, sure it is. Sure it is.
Might be a good thing, no?
I think ethnic slurs,
I took it as I was a very handsome man.
If they are politically incorrect, I think that it should go right across the board.
I agree with that.
I don't think
100%.
I don't think that because, for example, I don't think because I'm Italian that I can use ethnic slurs. Well, maybe I do. I was going to say I kind of enjoy it. You know what I mean? I kind of like it. I kind of like it. I like fooling around.
Did we ever see that, Nick? As soon as he came in this morning, you just started a whole new bunch of bullshit. That's for sure.
Anyways, we should do a podcast about that. I think
about that.
Yeah,
I'll line someone up. An expert.
So anyway, so he thinks you look
expert.
He thinks you look like a Gino in there.
He just said very Gino. So yeah.
So yeah.
I'm assuming it's the open shirt, no shirt underneath, and a little bit of chest hair coming out there, a little gray chest hair coming out there.
All right, Gino. What's next on the thing here?
What do we say? Grazie. That's what we were talking about.
If you go to Fishing Canada, by the way, you see that free shipping? It's on all orders over $100. That's all orders. New, old, sale, not sale. If your total order is over $100, the good folks at fishingcanada.com, the shop, the store, will pay for your shipping for you.
Very nice. It's very nice of you.
And no better time to go there than right now. There's some goodies going on, let me tell you. I don't want to spoil it for you, so you go check it out. It's at fishingcanada.com. While you're there, you might want to stop in and have a look at what's new Do we have a new today, by the way?
Well, we got listener feedback first.
There you go.
And then we could go to after that. Right, so we have from Facebook, Kevin Fox sends in something here in response to the new season of the Fishing Canada television show. He says, show ice fishing content. It's winter. You guys are always backwards. In the summer, you're showing ice content.
We are?
Well, no, we're not.
When have we done that?
That part of it's backwards for sure. We're always showing open water.
Kevin, when have we done that? I want to know if you've got, is that considered ice fish? There's no ice in the show.
No, in summer you're showing ice content. So that is incorrect. He is right. You guys are always we're fishing the open water,
right?
For the whole entire season,
right?
It's because
when was the last time we even produced an ice fishing show?
Man,
does anybody know?
That's a long time ago. That was definitely the Reno era, for sure.
Oh, without question. So that's pre-2006.
And it was a while before he retired.
So I'm going to say the mid-'90s, we aired a ice fishing show. That was the last time we did one.
I'm going to look it up after this.
I think we should explain why that happens, though, because I don't think people understand our broadcast schedule and why.
Yeah, well, okay, so we produce our shows. Now they're going to say, well, change your broadcast or your production season. We shoot our shows for the most part from May to all the way into late fall. Sometimes some seasons will run into some problems, so we're shooting in November because our programs have to be packaged and they have to be delivered to the station so they can air that following January, right? Which, when you really look at it on the big picture, there's not a whole lot of time for us to get to do what we do. So we are done. By the time our season starts in January, all of our field work is done. And certainly, in some years, we could have done an ice fishing show in October or November, back in the good old days when it used to get cold.
Yeah, when it used to freeze back then.
Or I guess we could go to Manitoba and go on the Winnipeg River and go after some of those greenbacks through the ice. I guess that's a possibility.
That'd be, yeah, you could. You're
and
right.
Maybe we could go to Quebec and shoot some ice fishing stuff and get away with that. But here's the problem. Once we air the episodes for the first time through the run, then they repeat themselves 4 more times throughout the course of the 12-month annual broadcast cycle.
Yeah.
And we just found a long time ago, we have been doing this for a year or two. We found out a long time ago that when ice fishing shows showed up in June, July, and August and September,
which is always backwards, for Kevin's sake. Exactly. We're backwards there.
The audience numbers went down. As soon as they saw it was ice fishing, they would turn to another channel. So we said, hey, I think this might be a pattern. Let's not do ice fishing shows anymore, and therefore this will not happen again. And then for the next 35 years, that's what we did. And here we are today now, for the first time that I can remember, somebody is asking us why. So there's why. Number one, it doesn't fit into our production cycle. And then number two, it doesn't really work with our broadcast cycle because most folks don't want to watch somebody ice fishing in June and July and August. Done?
Good answer.
Good answer?
Sure.
Well, let me know.
I'd like to know if Kevin, what he says in the summer, you show ice content. I'm not
I
sure
think he might be
that.
referring to our contest, maybe, because sometimes we'll give away like a live scope ice bundle.
But we're not doing an ice article in
It says in response to the new season of Fishing Canada show is what it says.
Right.
Yeah, he commented that. He's actually been commenting a lot on all of our stuff. He's a good fan. But
Okay. Well, we love you. We love you, Kevin Fox. Don't get us wrong. We're just
try to explain it. That's all. Yeah. Hopefully that explained it. I think that's a pretty good
Kevin reached out to us via Facebook.
Yep.
Is that normal? Is that where they normally get a hold of us?
A lot of people do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you want a question, and there is no question, there's no wrong question. There might be wrong answers now and then, but there's certainly no wrong question. Please feel free to contact us at info@fishingcanada.com. And then our good folks in the research department, they will pull that out and put it in Dean's drum, and then Dean reaches in before every podcast and pulls these things out, and here we go.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
You're not supposed to be doing that at the wrong time.
He does it perfectly sometimes, doesn't he? Just not right or wrong. It's just perfect. I like it. Drop the bomb.
Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate you. When you go to fishingcanada.com, by the way, whether it's to buy some new garments, some wonderful apparel, or whether it's to find out more about the show, you can even view the shows, by the way, on .com.
Or enter a contest.
Or enter a contest, which is ongoing. It is one of the largest contests for the outdoor industry in existence anywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. I believe that.
Both in terms of quantity and quality.
I believe that.
Big.
There's always
huge.
something going on.
If you're not in it, you're never going to win it. So judge yourself accordingly. But when you do go there, you'll also see that we're highlighting, for example, things like this week, I believe, the podcast network. A lot of folks may still not realize that this is a network. It's not just the show, right? And some of the other programs on there are featured from time to time. And this week, episode 26 of Diaries of a Lodge Owner.
Wow, he's at 26 already.
Already, eh? It's gone crazy, isn't it?
Wow. Amazing.
It's a very interesting one. It might not sound so, but you catch this episode and you'll say, wow, especially if you own a cottage or a rural property somewhere where this might apply directly to you. It's water and septic. Those sounds like the simple things that we take for granted, but
you do as a house owner, really.
Sure,
right?
you do.
In a city.
Where did it come from? I don't know. It just shows up. I open the tap and boom,
works
there it
good.
is. And how do you get rid of it? Well, I don't know. I just go in there, porcelain there, dump it, and flush it, and off it goes. I don't know where it goes. Well, you know, if you live in rural parts of the world, becomes a very important daily issue. And this episode 26. What's the title? Oh, it's Water and Septic. It's fascinating. You definitely want to check it out.
Talked to a cottage owner recently, and they had to dig 400 feet to get the well. 400 feet to get to water. And he's on the water. It's a cottage on the water. You know what I mean? It makes it, what?
That unheard of.
400 feet.
Like, how do you have...
How much money did that cost? Oh, God.
But how do you have the fortitude to keep
going,
to say to the owner standing up there, he's watching all this going on, and you know, he's like, are you in any water yet? No. How deep are you? 232 feet.
Yeah.
Like, how do you have this, like, to keep going?
$200, $400, $600. Yeah, you're right. Because I brought that up to a guy. I talked to a well driller on the weekend, and he said that's a deep well. He says it's exactly what he said. So, when you get to that point, you just wonder, maybe we should be stopping and figure something else out.
We got to move. We got to try someplace
or
else.
Pump it from the lake and have a purifying system or something.
How do you know? Now, they may know. Maybe they had one of those, you know, those little watering twigs or whatever. But even that, like 400 feet.
Not much twitching going on there, I don't think.
Holy man, you're going to hit the center of the earth. It's going to be hot water.
Anyways,
you want to check that episode, Diaries of a Lodge Owner, on Spotify, on any place where you consume your audio entertainment, or on our site on fishingcanada.com. It's there as well. Definitely good listening, and you want to hear that. In the news, Mr. Bowman.
Should drones be allowed for game recovery?
Wow.
That's a great title, because as of October 31st, 23, 45 out of the 50 U.S. states have laws that restrict the use of drones in hunting. And it goes on. You're thinking, okay, you shouldn't be using drones just to go out and find animals and kill them or whatever, right? But it's not just that. It's that they're stopping the drones from recovering shot animals.
And you know what? I can already think of why. I'll tell you why. Because they want to eliminate the possibility of somebody using that as an excuse.
Right. Right, because
which is unfortunate. Because
it's unfortunate
because recovering an animal would be, I would think,
that should be number one
at the top.
If you shot that animal, you need to recover that animal. You need to do everything it takes to get that animal back. So a drone to me is a perfect example of that thing. Especially if it has heat sensors in it, which some of them do nowadays, infrared or whatever. Yeah. It would see that body of that animal. Like, oh my God, they're way over there in that brush. Let's go get it.
Somebody ruined it for everybody else. Some goon.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right? And use the excuse, I'm recovering an animal. Well, when did you shoot it? Last Saturday. You know, because really, how are you going to verify whether, in fact, the drone is out there recovering an animal or not?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's an interesting news story. You need and you know, it might apply to fishing someday. Well, it does here in Ontario. Am I right? It already
You can't use drones to locate fish, to help you locate and catch fish. Like, not just hang a hook off and a line off your drone. You can't use it to go, from what I can tell, you can't go, okay, they're right there, cast there, cast there, cast there. I don't think you can do that.
No, you can't.
No.
In the province of Ontario is a total ban on using drones.
We showed that in one of our shows this year in the Sportsman's the Killarney Bay,
where you could see
you
us.
could see, and we went after the fact. We said, "Oh my God, we didn't realize that
they're
over
right
there was
there.
two giants that were sitting over there. You dummies!" So,
It's right behind you there. Little screenshot.
there it is, right there. It's right beside us, pretty much. So that screenshot shows it now. We might have seen, if that fish was moving this way, we might have seen that one, because you
And
can
by
see
the
how
way,
easy it is.
that's
like
a
that.
giant.
Yeah, that's a big old
It's a
pike
big
right
old
there.
pike.
Yeah, for sure. But if they were way over here or something like that, you know what I mean?
So I have to ask the question, how is it different than sonar? How is it different than an electric motor, for that matter?
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can we get somebody on the program at some point? Because
Yeah.
I think this warrants bringing an official on to discuss this.
Yeah. Yep.
Because there's got to be some thinking that we're missing right now. Because as long as I'm not deploying bait or a hook and line off of the drone, which would be stupid because the drone would get all caught up in it eventually, and you'd probably
It is done in salt water.
Yeah,
You take
yeah.
it and then they drop it, and then it's on a reel after that,
Yeah.
right? So
See, I think with this stuff, they're just scared of the loopholes, like people spying on properties and flying over private property and doing stupid stuff.
But we're talking out in the water.
I know, but like if you're over cottages, or I think with drones, it's always, they just err on the side of caution.
Well, you're not
But
going
they
to
can
find
do that anyways, can't they? If a guy has a drone license and it's not an air zone, they could do that anyways,
Yeah,
I
I
think,
guess so.
right?
More
Yeah.
likely they could do that than if they're looking for fish, because you're never going to find a fish in a cottage sink or anything. You got to go offshore.
You're not going to
So-
find it through Shania Twain's bedroom window.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Well, no. In all fairness, there was that one time. Okay. In all fairness, the cottage was there.
I love it.
And we were fishing right there.
Yeah, what could I do, right?
And the sun was at an angle
Yeah.
where we could get a better
I
view.
said,
with the-
Andrew, there's a fish over there. He says, where?
Anyways, I think it would make for a great program.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
can we
agree.
see
I'll
about
find
getting
someone.
somebody on that knows
That'd
a
be
thing or
great.
two?
Yep.
That would be great for hunting and fishing, for sure.
But in the meantime, you might want to go to fishingcanada.com, read the story, because it covers 50 of the states that have banned it. Ontario has banned it. I'm not sure about the rest of the country here, but it's an interesting discussion that's worth having at this point, because there's more and more drones than we care to count at this
Probably a lot,
juncture.
Yeah, I bet you there's a lot out there. So.
Fan question of the week before we get to our exciting scientific part of the show that I'm
Yes,
dying
sir.
to get
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cooke, Dr. Cooke on. Anyways, fan question submitted by Rick Langson from Manitoba. We were just talking about Manitoba.
That's correct, sir.
Holy
Greenbacks. You own greenbacks.
By the way,
Red
that's a
River.
walleye. They call them greenbacks out of the Winnipeg River because they literally have a greenback.
They're such a cool looking
Emerald
fish.
green.
First time I saw one,
Yeah.
I kept hearing about this greenback, and then all of a sudden I saw him. I said, "Oh my God, that thing has a
wonderful.
greenback."
Wonderful fish.
So it's a cool looking fish.
Rick will know about those. Rick Langson from
Oh, sure he
Manitoba.
will.
Anyways, he sends us via email this week's fan question, and it is this: what species do you like, or do you think is underrated in Canada? So I'm assuming, first of all, we're talking about sport fishing, obviously. What species do you think is underrated in Canada is this question. Mr. Bowman.
Well, see, I'm going to take his question more generic than the sport fish. I'm going to add a fish that it's not really a sheephead. A freshwater drum, to me, is one of the strongest fish out there. You can catch it on a variety of methods, especially casting, crankbaits, spinners, stuff like that. And they're so much fun to catch, and they are gigantic at times. When you catch a 20-pound sheepy on a little crankbait, and like we got a live scope area we're going to try this year. I don't know if you want to come along. You might want to come along. It's going to be fun. They school up, and you throw cast crankbaits to them and start catching them. Where can you get a fish that fights like that and schools up like that, is aggressive like that, and it's a catch and release fishery. It's out there, so.
And that's what I was going to say, and as we get more and more into catch and release. More folks are into catch and release. So in other words, they're just going out for the sport. Then why wouldn't
not?
you? Why not?
Exactly.
It has
it's like carp.
It has like incredible availability. They get big. They're strong.
They're so strong. It's ridiculous.
From what we know, they're in most freshwater lakes. So yeah, that would be a good one. Mine is probably not far from that in terms of weird fish or different fish, and that's the garpike. I think it's way underrated, way too underrated. In view of the fact that it's available in pretty much every watershed that dumps into Lake Ontario. So we have no idea how widely they're distributed, but I can pretty much tell you they're everywhere. You just have to go look for them and look for the
look for them.
Look for them and look for their habitat. That habitat is available everywhere. And I dare say they are everywhere. And I got to tell you, they are the most exciting fish.
They're fun. That's the best. It's probably the most fun sight fishing you're going to have in freshwater, right there.
And the hookup rate is like 20.
It's horrible.
25% maybe.
25. You must be good. Shit, I got about 3% the ones I caught. I could not keep one hooked.
They're a blast.
Oh my
they're
God.
An absolute blast. So
and fight like crazy.
Sheephead
through the
and
net.
garpike.
Remember that big one? You had a 5-footer. You went right through the net. What the heck? Oh my God, it's insane.
So yeah, there's the two underrated, and they're underrated because people don't even know about them. There's nothing really that's talked. Nobody's doing anything with them.
Yeah.
And if I was a guide, those would be two fish that I would specialize in.
Jamie Pistilli does on Gar.
Exactly.
Right? He makes a lot of money on that fish.
Yeah. I would specialize in them because they're plentiful. Hardy. They're fantastic. So there you go. That's the fan question of the week from Rick Langson from Rick Langson from Manitoba. The other one would be another one which is very rare, and I wouldn't probably say it's underrated. No, I'll take that one.
Come on, talk to me. Let me see. Let me give it a 1 out of 10
rating. It's too
rating.
exotic, and that would not be an underrated fish.
Canadian char?
Just too exotic.
I'm thinking now. I'm trying to think.
I was thinking the Inconoo.
Oh, wow.
She-fish. Only because how rare it is, how remote it is, but...
I heard they're real sissies, though. They can't...
They can't take the heat.
Yeah, they're like a grayling, right? They beat up real easy, so...
The humble goldfish, everyone's favorite aquatic pet. It's small, easy to care for. What's there not to love?
Even the cat may be mesmerized by the color and movements of your aquarium friends. Goldfish are great at home, but don't let them loose.
Releasing goldfish or other domestic aquatic pets or plants into natural environments is harmful to both your pet and the planet.
Goldfish disrupt ecosystems by outcompeting native species for food and resources in degraded habitats. They contribute to algae blooms, they kill aquatic wildlife, and pass viruses and diseases contracted in aquariums to wild fish.
They could even live up to 40 years and grow as big as a football. Anglers, this is where you come in. If you find a goldfish at your local fishing spot, report it to the Invading Species Hotline or go online to eddmaps.com.
Remember to never dump your live bait into the water and risk spreading other aquatic invaders. Keep our lakes free from invaders and don't let them loose.
There's an adventure just outside these walls.
It's something you'll hate to leave and can't wait to get back to.
It's a place where memories are made and bonds are forged.
For some, it's hitting the trails. For others, it's a weekend at the lake. It's a place full of campfires and quality time.
This year, take some time to reconnect with friends, family, and nature. No matter what adventures await you, Coleman has the gear you need. Visit colemancanada.ca to gear up today.
The outside is calling.
Answer the call.
As the world gets louder and louder, the lessons of our natural world become harder and harder to hear, but they are still available to those who know where to listen. I'm Jerry Ouellette, and I was honored to serve as Ontario's Minister of Natural Resources. However, my journey into the woods didn't come from politics. Rather, it came from my time in the bush and a mushroom. In 2015, I was introduced to the birch-hungry fungus known as chaga, a tree conch, with centuries of medicinal use by indigenous peoples all over the globe. After nearly a decade of harvest, use, testimonials, and research, my skepticism has faded to obsession, and I now spend my life dedicated to improving the lives of others through natural means. But that's not what the show's about. My pursuit of this strange mushroom and my passion for the outdoors has brought me to the places and around the people that are shaped by our natural world. On Outdoor Journal Radio's Under the Canopy podcast, I'm going to take you along with me to see the places and meet the people that will help you find your outdoor passion and help you live a life close to nature and under the canopy. Find Under the Canopy now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
All right, now for the scientific part of the program, Mr. Bowman. Enough with your rhetoric.
Enough of our, like your T-shirt says right there. That's about a bunch of.
That tells it all.
Exactly. So
as I mentioned at the top of the program, joining us now, our good friend, our in-house scientist, Dr. Stephen Cooke. He is a biology professor at Carleton University, among other things. He's published 700 peer-reviewed papers. I think that qualifies him as a professional.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Hey, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, great to have you, buddy.
Did I hear correctly? You just came from Africa on some work?
Yeah, I was off the coast of Africa, off the east coast. I was in the Seychelles working on bonefish and giant trevally. You don't like either of those, right?
No.
GTs. We'd love to have a GT fishing trip. Those things are nuts, eh? They're giants.
What were you doing? Like, what was the study?
On the bonefish side of things, we were looking at bonefish health. So we were collecting some blood samples using the Seychelles as a reference point for some work that's been done in the Florida Keys and throughout the Caribbean. So it's our belief that those Seychellian bonefish would be as pristine as one could find. Okay. And then with the GTs, we've had a telemetry study going for the last 3 or 4 years. So down there checking in on our telemetry arrays, doing some more tagging, working with guides at the Alphonse Fishing Company, and having a whole lot of fun.
Wow. Did you get to catch a giant trevally?
Absolutely.
Did you?
Last day there.
Good, man. Oh, God. That'd be fun.
Bringing it full circle, we asked you on the program because as of late, on the digital distribution side of the world, there's been a lot of folks jumping on bandwagons regarding the science behind wildlife management and in particular fisheries. There was a video that was produced by some Minnesota anglers, along with, I think it was M&R in Minnesota.
Yeah, the DNR, whatever they call it.
DNR, yeah. And they did their own little study on barotrauma and how it affects fish. And they use crappie that were being caught in the 20-foot, 25-foot depth range, and then
through the ice,
and then bringing them up and then putting them in a net so that they could monitor.
Clipping a fin too. They did a clip.
Oh, they clipped the fin
and all that stuff.
There's some question marks certainly that arose from anybody that watched the video, but they put them in the net to see if they would survive or not, and if they didn't, then obviously it was barotrauma, and we need to stop catching fish out of deep water. And then that went up, and then immediately after that, of course, the naysayers came on and said, yeah, well, that's all a bunch of right there on my shirt. Because in fact, that's not true, because we catch fish at 30 feet and 35 feet, and hell, we release them all and they're all good. So it's starting to get, and then one of these guys actually took it upon himself, and I don't know whether you are familiar with this one, but he kind of poo-pooed the whole scientific approach to these matters, and said that really science is not the right way to go, and we need to rely more on people like him who have got experience out in the field, because apparently scientists don't have experience out in the field, according to him. So I wanted to bring you on because I know this is right in your wheelhouse. What do you make of this crap?
It's pretty much been a full-time job to try and keep up with this. A lot going on. Where to start? I think I'll start with just sort of that I love this kind of conversation. Applied wildlife fishery science should not happen in a vacuum. It should not be just scientists doing science. We need to be delivering science that's relevant to management. And that means interacting with anglers, guides, and other professionals that are on the water so that the work we do has meaning. Right. And so I do like some of the themes that are being discussed about how anglers and scientists need to work together. Absolutely. And that's something that we certainly try to embrace with the work that we do, whether it's working with tournament organizers, whether it's working with members of Muskies Canada and other fishing clubs, whether it's working with guides and just, anglers. They have a lot to share. I think it's also fair to say that most fisheries managers I know and most scientists that work on recreational fish species are themselves avid anglers. And I think there's this sort of assumption out there that we want to do science so we can create more regulations so that there can be less fishing. And I think that's pretty far from reality. Many of us got into this because we love fishing, we love the resource, and we want to make sure that we will have fish to catch for our kids, grandkids, and so on. So I think just want to start with that. So,
yeah, and I think it's important to make a note here that you mentioned most of your peers are into the outdoors and into fishing. So they're doing this for more than just a job. And I think the other thing to bring out here too is that we're all, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all have different viewpoints, and we all have different ways of looking and doing things. And so there is not one perfect, you're right, there's not one perfect solution, but maybe a culmination of all. And having said that, I've worked with enough scientific-minded folks. Sometimes they do get stuck in the quagmire called science, right? Because sometimes science, and it's not perfect, as you just pointed out, right? And because sometimes they're so focused on the science that they don't see the bigger picture around
the practicality or something, nuances or something. Yeah.
So we do have to be careful with that.
Absolutely.
And although I do think the scientific community is well intended, we do have to be able to step back a little bit. So that adds up. 2 and 2 is definitely 4, but in this case, we really need to make it work out to 5. So if there's any argument, scientists, from my viewpoint and opinion, they're perfect when they're working between the lines.
Yeah.
But when we need to cross those lines, it gets a little bit difficult. So that would be the only thing I'd have to say about that.
Absolutely.
Stephen,
and I like to think of scientists as being so-called honest brokers.
Yes.
So where we are sort of, we're not all knowing, and our job is to talk about uncertainty. Science is imperfect because it's a human endeavor, and we are imperfect. We all bring baggage to the table. There's biases and lived experiences that color the glasses that we see the world. And with science, we try to put that bias in the background and really try to be honest brokers. And I think that scientists are probably the biggest critics of their own work. And I think some of that's been missing in this narrative too. We saw a a video clip and a website posting, sort of summarizing a pilot study. I can guarantee you and what didn't find its way into that was the boring text that we write in our science papers where we talk about the limitations, where we put it in context. And that's where we talk about things that were identified by folks as being potentially problematic. For example, why were the animals held on the surface for so long? Why was a fin clip used relative to other methods? And what does that mean in terms of interpreting those findings? And it's that boring part of the paper, usually right before the conclusion, where a lot of scientists go. We look at the methods, the results, and then we head for that limitations section, because the scientists who did that work will have almost gone to the point of discrediting themselves because they list everything that's wrong with the study. And we need to do that because we don't want a management agency, a decision maker, taking that work and applying it inappropriately. So we really focus on what is that frame of reference. So a study on ice fishing, crappie, barotrauma probably shouldn't be extrapolated out to tell us about barotrauma on red snapper off the coast of Florida, for example. So it's really talking about and understanding that frame of inference and what people need to know when they are thinking about using that information. What is the context in which that information was obtained? Where does it apply? Where doesn't it?
He pretty much answered my question on that one. But I think the good part of this, what we're doing right now, the good part about Aaron's video and the good part about the Angling Buzz putting it all out is that ultimately we're all going to learn. We're all talking about barotrauma, which is dangerous to fish, and we're talking about it. And we could become, through science and through anglers, we can find a solution or better solutions, right? So it's a good thing that we're bringing it up.
So here's what I'd like to do. Without putting you on the spot, and you tell us if we are, I'd like you to critique the science from a scientific standpoint, the scientific study that started this whole from the Linder camp with the DNR folks. I'd like you to look at that and either critique it or say, no, that is bang on. That's exactly what I would have done. And here's why. Can you do that? Because I'd like to critique the other side, which is the YouTuber video guy. Okay, so
yeah, let's do it both ways. Perfect.
Yeah. All right, so go ahead.
I will start off and say that I have access to the same stuff that everybody else does, which is the website and the video. So I do not have a copy of any fancy DNR reports or anything like that. So, so that makes it difficult to assess what was done because I can't see the methods, I can't see the statistics and so on. What I can do is make some inferences from the video that was shared and just what they talk about. One of the critiques that was levied, as I mentioned, was those animals were, once they were caught, they were held at surface and processed in various ways. They were measured, which is a common fisheries management tactic. We need to know if for example, mortality or behavioral impairments are size specific, so that can be done quickly. I think I'll also say that the fish we saw being processed, I think was probably done slowly to document and show the process. Usually we try to be lightning quick when handling fish at any time, but especially during a catch and release study because we want it to be as relevant to a real fishing situation as possible. So the fact that the fin was clipped, that does not bother me. We clip fins all the time. Many hatcheries clip fins entirely. They wouldn't remove the entire caudal fin, but a top or bottom part of a caudal fin, that's not going to impact locomotion or the ability of fish to return to depth in a meaningful way.
So I do want to argue that point just a bit because for years there has been a belief out there, not from the scientific community, but from the other side, from the dark side in this case, I dare say Daryl Cronzy, he's been saying for years.
Putting up the cross to the vampires.
Come on.
Bronzy.
But, if anybody has spent time with, this is based on steelhead and salmon, if anybody has spent time in the hatchery programs more than Daryl, I'd like to meet him, because
should put on some time out. For sure.
He has probably lifted more fish than anybody that I know alive today in terms of transporting fish to spawning areas. So, we have to give him a bit of credit for knowing something about that.
Yeah, for sure.
He's going to be happy to hear that one.
Yeah.
But he has said forever that we should not be clipping a fin, and he equates it to humans. When anybody listening, don't take this the wrong way. This is a little bit graphic, but let me just. He's saying that when a child is born, if you cut off a foot, the child is going to have a difficult time getting to adulthood. They will succeed in most cases, but it's going to be very difficult on them, right? He says a fish is no different. If you cut off one of these, it's going to be a problem, right?
Interesting.
But you just
make
said,
it even more difficult. What you're saying is kind of wrong in this. You should be an adult. You're like sometimes these fish. Well, no, I'm
talking
thinking of
fin clipping at.
I know, but I was thinking of their clipping later on in life. They're clipping these fish at
I'm talking about
stage.
clipping them at an early stage in life, or when you remove an appendage from a living organism, that appendage is part of their propulsion system, their fueling, whatever it is. It's going to be a problem.
Are they pectoral fins, the ones up at the front?
Those are the pec fins on most fish, yep.
If you take one pectoral fin off a lake trout, what does that do to that fish for the rest of its life?
It probably affects some really detailed kinematics if you measured it in the lab, but in nature, it probably is pretty meaningless. So.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but in this case, it was more like a trim. You go for a haircut, and it was just the upper caudal. So that, to me, that's just
the caudal is the tail, correct?
Caudal fin is tail.
Stephen, have we proven now, some 30, 40, 50 years later, have we proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that fish do not necessarily feel the same things that we do? And I'm talking in terms of pain, because the other part of this is also going to be, well, the thing is stressed out already. You just pulled it out of 30 feet of water. It's got this barotrauma happening. Then you walk it across the lake over there where those guys are, and they're screaming, they put it on a board, and now you cut something off of this fish. Does it feel that? Does that play into any of this at all?
Yeah. So I am a fish pain skeptic and an animal and fish welfare advocate. So, and I think we can separate those things. And I think we need to, because the evidence base about fish pain is pretty blurry. And the reality is it's very difficult to study. Fish don't talk. They haven't been, we try to sit them on the couch and listen to them, and they just don't have anything to say. But it's really, really difficult to know. So what I do is focus on welfare. And we know that, for example, getting fish back in the water as quickly as possible is good for welfare. We know that minimizing injury. So if you're fishing for fish and getting 2 or 3 treble hooks in their jaw, then maybe you want to switch to some single hooks, that kind of thing. Those are the really pragmatic things that one can do, as opposed to, to me, the fish pain debate is irrelevant. What matters is fish welfare.
See, in my opinion on that study that the Minnesota DNR did, to me, just listening to you guys, the fin clipping would be minimalistic compared to the time out of the water.
Yeah.
Especially with my experience of fishing for deep water fish, which I don't do a whole lot, but the key is get them back soon as you get it. They have a chance of going back. So I don't know. That, to me, I agree with that.
Yep.
I'm going to maybe shock you, and it's only based on what you just said. And Pete and I both looked at ourselves and had a little giggle. Are you aware?
Here we go.
No, but I have to ask him.
Yeah.
Okay, so the province of Ontario, when you go into a fish sanctuary that has a special fishing conditions, and one of those fishing conditions, or 2 of those fishing conditions, are you can only angle for these fish with a single barbless hook. What does that mean to you, Dr. Stephen Cooke?
So the science behind with small cell monads, which is usually where these things are put in, right? It's usually for
small cell monads. Yeah.
There's actually very little evidence that barbless hooks influence mortality outcomes. The reason that barbless hooks have become so popular in catch and release is because anglers demand it. Anglers say, wow, this is so much better from fish, you must do it. Managers say, well, we don't care. It's not hurting, but it's also not going to help, so we'll go along with it. So
I love you, Stephen Cooke. I love you. You're a good man.
Most barbless, like
That's awesome.
There's a gazillion studies on barbless hooks, and sure, you get the fish off more quickly, but that is also context dependent. And so when I fish with a net, I try to use barbless hooks, certain kinds of nets, because the barb gets caught in the net and then you can't get it off. There's other, if I'm fishing largemouth with a chatterbait, barbless, it doesn't matter. A barb isn't going to affect my ability to get that fish off. And it's certainly not going to affect whether it lives or dies. What dictates whether or not, primarily, the biggest driver is where a fish is hooked, and not surprisingly, gullet, throat, esophagus, whatever you want to call it. Fish that are hooked in that location, those locations do relatively poorly, and fish that are hooked in the jaw do relatively well. A barbless hook in the gullet is going to do just as much damage as a barbed hook. So it really comes when
I can see it now. Yeah. I can see the complaints now. You say, what is he talking about? If that hook is barbed and it's down its throat, I'm going to tear half of the fish's internals out, pulling it out.
You're just going to leave that hook in and cut the line. That's what the science says.
There you go.
Which brings me to the real reason I asked you this question. Are you aware?
Stephen's too in depth. He didn't even start. He didn't get your gist, did he?
So once again, I'm going to ask you one more time. If I say to you, Stephen, you can only fish with a single barbless hook in this pond, what is your bait going to look like?
Yeah, show us that lure.
Walk us through. What does that lure look like with a single barbless hook?
Yeah, it's probably going to be something like a trout nibble or a fly. You really don't have many options.
But the hook itself, what's it going to look like?
I'll
describe it to me.
Presumably it's going to be J in shape. I'm not a big fan of Aberdeen hooks.
Keep coming, because I'm going to floor you.
Boulder style or something like that.
You're going to fall on the floor. Make sure there's nothing around you, because you're going to fall all over it. Do you know what we in the province of Ontario consider to be what qualifies as a single hook?
No, I'm interested.
Do you know that hook that's on the end of a MEPS bait, a MEPS lure? Yeah. Do you know that hook? Yeah. It's got those nice 3 little points. In the province of Ontario, that is considered a single hook. You didn't know that, did you?
No, I didn't. These legal technicalities.
We just found out. And I'll tell you what the shock was to us. We've spent years fishing single barbless hooks. Sometimes you don't have them with you, and you're confronted with a situation where you need to fish single barbless hooks. So what do? We get our cutters out, and we cut the 2 hooks off of the treble. We say, boom, there we go. Problem solved. For years, we didn't need to do that here in Ontario.
Fascinating.
So as long as as long as the barbs are pinched, you can use a treble hook as a single hook. You can't use 2 treble hooks, but you could use 1. Is that bizarre?
Yeah. There's.
I wanted to ask you, because I value your.
I had no idea. That's
exactly. Look into it. We've had M&R officials on the show. We've said that. They said, that's a single hook, because in their opinion, it's all one piece, right? All 3 of those things are all welded together, or in some cases, 2 of them are on 1 wire. That's a single hook to them.
We just came from the Miramichi River, and there's just 1 hook. You squeeze that barb down. If you put a treble and squeezed all 3 down, you'd be busted in no time at all. Yeah. You know what I mean?
This is the only jurisdiction in the country that thinks that is a single hook. bizarre. Just I thought I'd let you in on that. But anyways, we're way off topic. So okay, so your concern with that video is that maybe they spent too much time handling the fish, you think?
Potentially, but again, and so it was suggested that they were fishing pretty far away from the area where the fish were processed and where the pen was. And, I would assume that they recorded the time that between capture and when the individual went in, and then you could include that as a factor in the analysis. And so that is something that is actually useful information. So if we assume that is essentially simulating air exposure, so, I know most anglers wouldn't be clipping the fin or measuring them, but that's neither here nor there, in my opinion. It's that air exposure and general handling time. And so if they recorded it, they would have caught some fish right beside. Some fish might have taken longer. You get a good gradient. And then analytically, you could say, what is the effective time as a factor in influencing mortality?
So you would look at if they did that, and you're assuming because they were scientists, they would have done that, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's just for the sake of arguing say that it was 10 minutes. Which is bizarre. 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes. So it was 5 minutes from the time they were pulled out of the water to the time they were put in that basket. So when you have the mortality rate that they had, which was like crazy, so you look at that study and say, okay, all right, so we've established that with 5 minutes of air time, these fish can't survive. So let's do it again now, and let's see about doing it in 1 minute or whatever. Is that kind of the way the science works in that?
Exactly. And that's about the frame of inference. So if all of those fish were sampled and held held in air or held at atmospheric pressure for, 3 to 5 minutes or even 1 to 5 minutes. That's the context in which those data need to be interpreted. It wasn't it was a barotrauma study in those waters for those fish in those dissolved oxygen conditions for fish that were captured and held in air for that period of time. And so asking the question, what would the mortality rate be if those fish were only exposed to air for 15 seconds or 30 seconds, which is about what I saw in the video that was posted, the YouTube video. It seemed to be, and maybe there's some fancy editing, but it seemed to be 15 to 30 seconds or so. That's a different question. And that's where the managers managers care about those details. One paper, one study rarely changes policy or practice. It's about a burden of evidence, a pile of papers, consultation and engagement with the angling community, potentially with rights holders, indigenous groups, depending on the context, discussion with peers. So the managers would be going back and forth with their own science advisors. They might seek out some external opinion. I wish if I wrote one paper, it had the potential to change policy or practice. It does not.
I was going to say
slow process.
I was going to say, how the hell did you ever get 700 peer-reviewed papers on that basis?
There were not 700 policy changes.
Exactly. Wow. So, okay, so then at best we can look at this and say that perhaps the scientists involved in that particular one maybe they went back and did what you just said, and maybe they did a redo saying, hey, you know what, 5 minutes is too long, or whatever that time is. We need to do this again and see if we can get it down to a shorter period of time, see if that helps. That was not indicated, obviously, in the critique of that video. It was just said, there, you see? Yeah. Scientists don't know what they're doing. Why do we let them, manage our fishery and wildlife? Why? That's what I took exception to this more than anything else, because there was a lot of factors. First of all, how do we know that they only sourced one location? Maybe those fish, because of their condition down under the ice, maybe they were already stressed out. Maybe they were in a situation, maybe food was an issue. Maybe temperature. God only knows what was the issue with that bunch of fish.
It could be. Lake to lake, every lake is different.
Every lake is different at a different time, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just think
Yeah.
there was so much more to that could have been done. That, by the way, could have been very positive because as anglers, and you know this, we're always concerned about barotrauma. We're like, what's that magic number? It's not just depths, but what's the temperature? What's the perfect temperature where you can expect the mortality rate to go up? Like we're always thinking that way. So I think this would have been a perfect opportunity to take that DNR science and question it and see if we can get them to say, yeah, but we did it again the following day and we moved location and we did this and that. They might have done that for all we know.
Right.
Right?
Yep. They certainly could.
There's actually
but no, we look at it and say, that's
if you
it.
go further down in that article, there's actually 3 lakes. They did 3 sort of one-offs.
Right.
And in fact, the one water body, they had a fair amount of mortality. You probably can't see it on there.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
These other bars, you can see the high level, the high bar there is recovered, and the low one is non-releasable or died. So it was one lake is where things went poorly.
And that's the one they used.
It also means you're putting bounds on, if that's worst case scenario, if you keep them at surface for 5 minutes and air expose them and take your time getting them back in, worst case scenario might be X. Now the question is, what are those thresholds? Because that's what's useful for educating anglers.
Absolutely.
How much is too much? And so then you start working backwards from there. In many ways, and scientists are bad for this, we want to share what we're doing as soon as we know something, but sometimes we jump the gun and share before it's finished. So to me, this was sharing a pilot study or a snippet when what we really need is the full study, which or maybe the next study, if you will. And also them indicating our plan next is to do X, Y, and Z. I think that alone probably would have assuaged all the concerns, saying we're not done here. We know there's some, contextual issues that need to be thought about. We want to make sure this is as realistic as possible. So we're going to go back and do this part in a different way.
Was that DNR study done to sway people from just don't fish for crappie under the ice, a deep crappie? Is that what they started with? Was that their intent?
That was the intent of the whole study, was that, maybe we should reconsider this whole thing. And here's why. Maybe they made it, I don't know. That was an independent production using DNR science, right? And there might have been ulterior motives. We don't know. There might have been all kinds. Just like there were ulterior motives in the other video.
Yeah,
a ton of ulterior motives that I'll get into here in a moment, in my opinion. But I want to ask you a question. As one of the, I think, anyways, correct me if I'm wrong, you're one of the most qualified people for this question because you're also an angler. See, there's a lot of scientists that aren't necessarily as hardcore as you are in terms of fishing and angling and sheer enjoyment of it. So my question to you is quite simple. Do you believe that a catch and release style, assuming that everybody's performing it properly, is more effective in open water than it is when it's hard water? In other words, winter versus summer. Where are the best results right now as far as the scientific community is concerned? Are we getting better results from open water fishing or ice fishing with our releases?
We know way more about open water. There are probably, for every ice fishing study, there's probably 50 open water studies.
Okay.
Ice fishing research, other than a handful of studies, I would say most of it's happened in the last 5 or 6 years. And partly that's because of the challenges with doing it. We're being more creative. And the YouTuber was creative, using the forward-facing sonar as a means to look at reascent. We're using chainsaws to cut nets into the ice so that we can, give the fish the opportunity to get to depth. We're using, nets that allow them to get down to the bottom, as opposed to using tanks on the surface and so on. But again, it's context matters so much. So open water, well, if I release a bonefish and there's sharks everywhere, that's not so good.
Right.
So With catch and release, it's one of those things where we keep saying it depends, and anybody that says it depends is full of it. That doesn't say that is full of it, because it's very difficult to generalize. There's a couple things we can say. We can say that catching a fish hooked in the throat is more likely to die than a fish hooked superficially. Air exposure isn't great for fish, so try and minimize that.
Hot or cold, right? In terms
hot
of
or cold. Hot water usually makes things worse for fish. Okay. We don't know a whole lot about that really cold end ice fishing, but as long as the fish don't get damaged or frozen and get back in the water quickly, they seem to do fine. But we don't have a whole lot of long-term under ice survival data. We sort of have 24 hours or, we saw them swim to the bottom and we assume they're okay. That's kind of what we've got to work with there.
What about, so let's just take a trout, for instance, a rainbow trout, and going on Anza's, but not quite winter. So spring, summer, fall. We're going to throw a rainbow trout back in the nice cool water periods versus mid-August, let's just say the hot water. They have a better chance of survival in that colder water, or is their body temperature going up help them when it comes summertime, et cetera? Is there anything to that?
Yeah, colder for cold water fish is better. Their metabolism is faster, but that doesn't necessarily mean they recover more quickly. It means that their engine is basically empty. They have spent everything they have on that fight. And so a long air exposure time, or you release them and they're being chased around by an otter or something like that, they're not going to have any gas in the tank left to do what they need to do. So at warm, here's how I like to think about it. Fish will tell you how they're doing. If you bring in a fish and you try and release it and it sits there in your hands and just stares at you and does not try and get away from you, something is up. You've probably, maybe you fought the fish for too long. Maybe you took 2 or 3 extra pictures. So change things. Every angler knows when a fish is spunky or not, vigorous or not. And what I like is you can change your behavior in real time. You can say, okay, I'm gonna switch rods. I'm gonna switch from my 7 weight to my 8 weight, or I'm gonna switch from 10-pound test to 14-pound test, and I'm gonna see if I can get that fish in a little bit more quickly next time and see if it makes a difference. Oh, sure enough, that fish now is spunky, and I've adjusted my gear to ensure that fish is in the best possible condition at time of release. And when water temperatures are hot, that's when you really need to be concerned about air exposure, where you really need to be concerned about quick handling and minimizing your interaction with the fish.
A little bit off topic, but I have to run. I got to run this by you anyways, because I know there's going to be a deluge of emails and messages coming in after this airs. We produced a program that's going to be airing, I think, in a week or two. The Franny Smallmouth.
It just aired.
Oh, did it air?
Just aired.
This week?
That's correct.
Okay. So we were fishing for big smallies, and one of the fish that we hooked up with almost immediately after it got hooked up, it ran into some problems with a giant muskie.
Wow.
And
see, if Stephen was a true fan, he'd already know that because it aired on the weekend. Right? So
obviously, he was in Africa, for God's sake.
That's the only excuse, Stephen.
They didn't have it on the Air Canada flight. Maybe next time. Yeah.
So it's on YouTube now. So anyways, so very early in the fight, I'm talking in the first 15 seconds, the fish unfortunately got chomped on by a giant 50-incher, gigantic muskie. And this muskie just took us all over the St. Lawrence and, screaming and yelling like a bunch of little girls. But anyways, when we finally got the muskie tired out, we were able to get it up to the boat and up to the surface, where we saw that this giant muskie had a tail and a bit of a head sticking out of its yap, and it was the smallmouth. And when he saw us at that moment, he opened up and he swam away. So we brought the fish into the boat, and it was in tatters. I mean, it was not pretty.
He's a Billy Connolly. The arse was in tatters.
It was in tatters, and we looked at it, and we hemmed and hawed a little bit what to do, and we decided, you know what, let's put it back and see what happens. Now, we did say on camera, this fish will probably survive. Like we were scientists, right? Yeah, no, this fish will, it's going to survive for sure. Like we knew anything. We just didn't want to kill it. It had already been traumatized, and we wanted to give it a chance, and so we put it back in the water. What's the chances of that fish surviving when its flesh has been clearly ripped open? What are the chances of a fish like that surviving? Or will it just be food again as soon as it goes in there?
It's possible, but if a fish is healthy to start with and is, nice plump fish in good condition, its immune system should be just fine, and it'll start to heal and repair as long as it hasn't bled out too much. It's probably most at risk for those first few days where it might get a fungal infection. It just sort of, again, it depends, but I like to err on the side of caution. Sometimes our permits require us to bonk a fish like that and bury them above the high water line. I'd rather see these fish put back so that those nutrients, there's plenty of snapping turtles and other scavengers out there that if the animal dies, I want those nutrients back in the system. So that's my strategy.
You see that? We've been arguing for forever, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's a regulation that states that if you're doing a shore lunch and you gut your fish and you clean your fish and stuff, do not throw it in the lake.
No, it's illegal to throw it in the lake.
It's illegal. You got to carry it above the water line and dispose of it somewhere. I don't even know where. Yeah. When you're out in the middle of nowhere, I don't know where that place is. But we've always been of the belief that is going to feed somebody, something, whether it's gulls from above or turtles from below or other fish.
Otters, maybe.
Otters.
Something like that.
Why do you think, I don't get it. Yeah. Help me with this one.
I wasn't in the room where that regulation was crafted, but I'm going to guess that the intent was more about limiting odor issues around urban centers or boat docks or marinas, and also leading to wasted time for COs. So you can imagine conservation officers getting a call that, there's been a fish kill, there's a pile of dead fish or carcasses, please come investigate. So, and potentially bringing in, unwanted vermin like raccoons and so on. So the idea is, burying above the high water line addresses some of those issues. But that's I have no real, should fish nutrients be back in the lake? Sure. Are the fisheries in Ontario going to collapse because we bury our walleye, walleye carcasses above the high water line? No. So it's kind of
it's a weird one, isn't it?
It's a weird one.
See, to me, I think it's a perfectly healthy, natural way to
everybody
continue
the
cycle.
Natural thought is that.
There isn't.
By the way, that smallmouth that Ange caught, it had zero blood coming off it. It was just cuts. It was just like there was lacerations, like no blood coming out there. Yeah, just knife cuts. So my thought is that muskie knew that. He's done that about 10 times. He says, okay, now they're going to throw it back, and I got an easy meal now with no hook in him. Smartest muskie in the St. Lawrence River. Oh, God.
Talk about the ultimate fishing experience, though, and that's why you got to love fishing. Like, where else are you going to get that kind of story where you see nature at its ugliest best? This poor little smallmouth minding its own business. We come along and interact with it, and everything's going good, and then all of a sudden, just when it thought it was at its worst, boom, things come in and get really bad with this giant muskie. Like it's I get goosebumps just thinking about that.
Yeah, it was cool. That was a cool one. We interrupt this program to bring you the much anticipated bonus code for the latest Fishing Canada giveaways. This week's code is FIZZ. That's FIZZ, Fizz. Just type that in the bonus coach section of the contest and receive 100 free entries towards all our current giveaways. For those of you who aren't entered, what are you waiting for? Head over to fishingcanada.com while you listen to the rest of this episode, click contests, and sign up for all the latest Fishing Canada giveaways. And now, back to the episode. Stephen, you said something very quickly on the video we were talking about, the YouTube video. Is your team at Carleton, are they using forward-facing sonar yet for any of your studies?
We are not, but I have colleagues that are, and most work so far has been in the context of habitat assessment, although there are other, we're using side scan sonar for that as well, short answer, no, but there are now 2 or 3 studies out there that have looked at the extent to which it increases catchability. I think there's studies all from the US, I think some reservoir studies, and I don't think at least the ones done so far have shown much of a difference. So it's not like you catch more fish if you're using it. I think you might catch different fish that were otherwise perhaps hidden. Yeah. So there's that side of the equation. I think that's what when I think about front-facing sonar, and you can find fish where you couldn't find them before. I think. So smallies in particular.
I got a feeling you guys are going to be using that in the upcoming.
Yeah,
It sounds to me like a perfect scientific tool.
Oh my God, it's better for science than it is for anglers, as far as I'm concerned.
I watched it very quickly. I watched Roland Martin's coming up show. We had it Roland Martin's show here from the U.S. and he threw his, that big net that he throws out there.
Yeah, I saw.
Did you see that? And I dropped over top of all the
that
bait.
was unbelievable.
You can see everything down there, man. He caught his bait throwing that net and watched it all happen. So
anyway. Any of the naysayers that say it's unfair and this and that, well, it's not even worth debating, because the same could have been said about graphite rods. The same could have been said about electric motors. The same was said about,
side scanning.
It doesn't matter. It's a new tool that technology has bestowed upon us, and we embrace it. And
I just wondered if he was using it, because I think there'd be...
So
back to barotrauma. We're way off.
Well,
again,
back to what caused this whole debate in the first place. So now, is there anything else about that video that you saw from a scientific standpoint that you want to debate, or at least throw out there?
Yeah, I thought that I have to connect it to the YouTube video. There was concern that the fish were unable to get back down because of the width of the net.
Right.
And I think that's valid, especially for, fish bumping into mesh, being unsure of what that is. And then that, maybe getting a little bit entangled and having to circle around and head back up. So I think that having wider diameter nets or pens is always a good idea. So that's more context, right? So there may have been challenges for those fish reaching depth, but again, hard to tease out what was driven by the long air exposure or handling time versus what was a consequence of that net. We've done work with barotrauma and nets and walleye and had no problem with them getting back down. And we were using nets that were maybe about 1 meter in diameter, 3 feet, and not having a problem. So I think it's probably the impairment rather than the net diameter that's the big thing. But if it's a concern and we think that might be, then maybe we go with wider nets. Or
it might even be species driven, right? I know walleye definitely go straight down. When you throw them babies in, they're headed to the bottom. Maybe
that's a good point.
Maybe crappie need a little more, who knows? But it's a valid point, and it was a simple observation. We all saw it, and we'd all come up with the same conclusions that maybe the net.
Yeah, why? Yeah, exactly. Why not a bigger net? Yeah.
Could have been a little.
To summarize, it's not that it was bad science. The danger is using that science in a bad way.
Bingo.
Right?
There you go. Yeah.
So as long as the science is presented in an authentic way with all the details and caveats around it, that is the context in which the findings apply. If a manager then takes that and uses it to roll out some kind of uber restrictive regulation that, based on a specific context that's different than what most anglers encounter, that's where the challenge is. And you don't see that happen because Anglers have access to the same science materials that we do these days. And as I said, management bodies want to get it right. They don't, the governor and the premier, they get lots of letters as is. Nobody wants to be, making big issues out of a crappy regulation, right? Leave that to the fisheries managers, and that means them doing their due diligence and engaging with anglers. That's why we have in Ontario, we have the fisheries management zone councils, where there would be discussions, and those councils are populated by and large with people from the recreational fishing sector. It's lodge owners and guides and multi-species anglers and so on.
Stakeholders. They've all got,
that's so important.
So here's my take on that before we switch over to the video guy. I would have liked to have seen, but because there were ulterior motives to this critiquing of this scientific video, I would have liked to have seen the scientists say at some point, okay, you know what? This is what's happening with these fish that we're catching at 28 feet or whatever the depth was. With these same circumstances, the time in open air, the fin clipping, the net, all of those things put together, what would happen if we caught a fish in 6 feet? Can we catch one in 6 feet, guys? Let's just see what happens if we get the same result. Or is that 6 foot? Because the whole premise of this was to see about the pressure, how fish deal with pressure. To me, they haven't really proven anything because they haven't compared it to less pressure.
But in that case, specific to crappie, you won't catch them in 6 feet of water under the ice.
Of course,
right? So
of course. But that would really give us the definitive answer that here's that magic number. It's 28 feet, and we should not be fishing. In fact, we should not be fishing these fish at all.
Yeah.
Because here's what happens at 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 and 14. That video, to me, that DNR site really didn't give me much other than the fact that under all of those circumstances, i.e. the 28 feet, the amount of time out of the water, the measuring, the clipping, and then putting them in a tight hooped net resulted in a disaster. So as an angler, I'm never going to do that. I know I'm never going to do that because that's all wrong. That's bad. That's bad. I don't think it proved anything. I don't think we still have a clear picture of the barotrauma that may or may not cause a high mortality rate in our catch and release through the ice. And by the way, that's also through the ice, and I would throw that into that equation too. So I'm not going to fish 28 feet. I'm certainly not going to do it through the ice. I'm not going to walk them 100 yards over that way to put them in another holding area. I'm certainly not going to handle them and fin clip them, and I'm not going to do all that stuff. But beyond that, it really doesn't prove anything to me, right? That's my opinion.
I wonder if Stephen, if they didn't have the net. So let's just say they did everything the way they did it, and they, instead of that net being there, they just had a hole that they dropped them down, and they had 10 cameras all around there shooting around. Do you think there'd be a different result, those fish swimming down?
Yeah, so there's two questions, right? The reason they wanted to hold the fish in the net was to quantify mortality. And I'm uncertain, I assume they held them overnight. So 24-hour mortality, to get a 24-hour mortality estimate.
Right.
And so both of those things are relevant. What fish are at what depth are fish unable to get down? And no matter what depth you're caught at, are you going to survive 24 hours or not?
Bingo.
And
that wasn't proven in either video.
Exactly. That's the point. That's the point I want to make.
There's no science there.
I'm going to try and not use any derogatory comments here, but the other guy who authored the video, disputing the first video, he hasn't proven anything to me. Number one, you guys hit it right on the head. How long did those fish survive that went down, that we saw going down on the image on the screen? We don't know.
Yeah.
All we know is that we saw an image of a fish that swam to the bottom. The other thing, the scientific study had, from my count, at least 9 people on location, each one of them performing a certain function of the study. But more importantly, it was a collaborative effort between people who kept an eye on the authentication of the study. Everything was above board. The other one, who's calling himself now the savior to fishkind because he's the only one who gets it. Apparently, he's the only one who knows you can't hold a fish out of water for very long. He's figured that out. Us idiots haven't figured that out yet. But he's by himself. I don't know how many fish it took to get the 12 that survived. It might have been 112. I don't know that because it was all editing. So I have no proof whatsoever that his 12 fish, number one, only took 12 samples to get 12 to swim down. And how many of those survived? We don't know. They might have all died for all I know. Maybe in another 10 seconds, they would have slowly started drifting up. Who knows? So yeah. I'm skeptical. And then couple that with throwing the scientific community under the bus and claiming himself to be the savior. I found it totally disgusting, and I don't know anybody. Now, I said I wasn't going to get into this, but I got to tell you, I have had the pleasure or displeasure one time in my life of breathing the same air as this person at a function. First time I ever met him, and he acted no differently in that circumstance. And you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. He acted like a total buffoon. At that time, just like he did on that video, claiming himself to be the savior. Well, I really question that kind of experimentation and trying to prove that we are all wrong. And the other thing I took exception to, damn it, I'll tell you right now, he threw us under the bus in that video as well. Us being our industry,
TV,
the TV fishing guys, saying that we don't know a thing about catch and release. And we, hold our fish out of the water way too long. And he knows how to do it right, though. He is, like I say, he's a savior. Anyways,
Stephen, let's go back to that video, because one thing that did intrigue me of all his little studying is that release technique that he did.
Yeah.
When he dipped the fish tail first down, got the water in the mouth, then turned. Does that work? Do you know if that works? Or I've never done it before. I've never seen it before. So
I'd never seen that before. No. So I have no clue.
So you, how long have you been in the science business?
Here's the deal. If you push, a while. If you push a fish into water, or a fish is oriented downwards, it has these things called opercula, and the bubbles the water will displace it. So you don't need to fill the gap. So I think it's just that has no merit. It just doesn't make sense. But
okay, I was wondering, because that's the one thing that I looked at and I said, well, I'm thinking, okay, I've only been fishing for 50-something years, and I've never done that. Maybe that is
maybe you should do that. I think you should do that.
But it just, I don't know. Yeah. So I just wondered. I wanted a scientific note of it.
It's just another piece of...
It worked that day for those 12 fish. It worked for him for that day, right? So
it looked good on the screen. Yeah. That I will give you.
You intrigued me on that. That's right.
That's kind of cool to think. That's like those guys who were cheating at that tournament one time, putting water in the fish's mouth and closing it when they put it in the tank. But anyways, the
like
point,
sinking a beer bottle.
Exactly.
There you go. You don't want to put it upside down like that.
The bottom line is, I don't think it's good for our business, our industry, our new anglers. I don't think that kind of work is going to, in the long run, I don't think it's going to play well. And I certainly hope it's not going to be a trend where all of a sudden everybody is a scientist and everybody knows how to handle our fish, and we don't. The rest of us morons don't. We just have no idea. We're clueless. I just hope it's not a trend, because it's going to get ugly. It's going to be disgusting.
Yeah, we can all work together.
Sure, we can.
I would love to get in the boat with Stephen Cooke, and just for a couple of days, you just go for it and say, Stephen says this, I say that, and we work together, and it'd be great. You know what I mean?
And even then, at best, we can't call it conclusive that this is right and that is wrong. What you can do is use experience, trial and error, multiple studies, peer-reviewed. I mean, I could go on and on. Use all of those things to hopefully help us manage wildlife better.
What does it take to make something conclusive? So you're doing a study in fishing. And you're going to say, okay, this is pretty good. Is there a percentage number? Is there something, some kind of gauge that says, okay, this science has now proven this?
Yeah, we tend not to use the word prove because there's always uncertainty unless it's sort of a maxim or something like evolution or gravity and so on. So we tend to talk about the strength of evidence. And it's when that uncertainty starts to get to the point where, we're quite certain that mortality is X. And when we do our modeling, because the mortality rate may be quite high. What matters is how that feeds into population models. So, and they will do the math and come back and say, you know what, for this species in this system, 5% mortality with catch and release, given the amount of fishing effort, is problematic. But in that lake, maybe we can handle 30%, so all of this just gets fed into management models, but also education. And I think that's the other side of thing. There was this assumption in the other video that everything's going to lead to regulation. That's not how it works. We educate, and when that doesn't work, we regulate.
Very well
I
put.
like that.
I like that a lot.
That's a good way of saying it.
We could go on and on all day long, I know.
Can we not just ask him about fizzing and stuff like that?
Oh, hurry
quickly?
up. He's got to.
I got to ask you about fizzing.
He's never going to come back,
does
for
it
God's
work?
sake.
Well, that'll be our last question. Does fizzing work, and do you say people do it, or anglers do it, or anglers don't do it? How's that?
Yeah, again, context matters. I'm going to give you an example, and maybe we can talk about this one more in the future, but we just wrapped up a study with smallmouth bass, and we fizzed them, and we released them over smallmouthy depths, so about 30 feet of water. And then we released some in the middle of the lake over 100 plus feet of water. The fizzed fish go to the bottom.
Like,
if you release a fish in 100 meters of water, 100 feet or 100 meters of water that's been fizzed, it goes to the bottom.
Wow.
That is new information for all of us. And then when we started, we put a little bit on Facebook.
Steven, stop for a second. I got to ask you, is that dangerous for the fish?
Yeah, that's very dangerous for the fish.
Like, that's got to be, like, could kill the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. We sent down drones to get, drones to see the fish at that depth, and they're just sitting on the bottom. They look like they're on their way out, not surprisingly.
Wow.
So,
that's crazy.
So again, it's fizz, but don't. And the reason that is, with bass tournaments now, they seem to be moving away from live release boats where you go release your fish on your own, and they kind of point and say, go that way. There's nice deep water over there. So deep, but you still want to be above habitat where they would make a living.
Right.
So 30, 35 feet, fine, but
max,
don't go over the drop off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's an example of where context matters. The fish that were fizzed and released over shallow-ish water did just fine, but those released over deep water didn't. So
fizzing does work, is what you're saying, if they're released over the proper depths.
Yeah, there's pretty decent evidence of long-term survival of a variety of marine and freshwater species. So the bigger issue though is, what does that fish had to deal with while it is at the surface? So if it's a fish that's been in a live well for a number of hours, if it's bouncing around because it's got problems with equilibrium. So the consensus is to fizz your fish when you get when's they're showing signs of barotrauma, as opposed to waiting till the end of the day, because they'll have been upside down in the live well and getting beaten up and so on.
That's amazing. Super quick. Then the super quick. A descending device, because I experienced this myself. A descending device. I had a walleye caught out of deep water. She was upside down in the live well. I dropped her down and I watched it on the PS30, our Panoptics, our first Pan. I watched the whole thing. The fish went right like that. I released. The thing popped off at 30 feet where I had it set, but it was over about 60 or 70 feet of water, and she went straight down there too. That wasn't a fizzed fish. Would that be the same scenario, that these descending devices will send that fish right to the bottom too? You got to be careful.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay, one to look into, buddy. One to look into.
Yep. Hey, I just want to say something to end here, and that's that, I do think there's an opportunity here, and that's to carry on the conversation between anglers and managers and scientists.
Absolutely.
And perhaps we as the science community have failed. We have failed to be as available as needed to be able to answer these questions. So I'm super appreciative to folks like you for bringing the science community out of our ivory tower and giving us an opportunity to interact with the community. So really thankful for that.
Well, case in point, with this episode, we contacted 3 other scientists after you weren't available. They all turned us down, saying they weren't comfortable with this. So yeah, great message.
Yeah, thank you.
Great message to deliver to the scientific community. We talk to M&R all the time about this, is that they get a bum rap. And one of the reasons they get a bum rap is because they have shrouded themselves in secrecy and they are untouchable and they don't communicate all the wonderful things that they're doing. They don't tell anybody. The only things you know about them is they're busting people and they're doing all these nasty things, but that's not the truth. The truth is they're doing a whole bunch of wonderful things, but they refuse to communicate that to people. Yeah. And we need to bring that out.
Yeah, across the Midwest, where I'm really familiar with Minnesota DNR, Wisconsin DNR, and New York DC, M&R, Quebec colleagues, fantastic. We are so fortunate to live in a part of the world where we have science-based fisheries management, but there's also a lot of engagement with those different stakeholder groups to make sure that everybody understands why things are done, when they're done, and that we have people that are working on our behalf. I don't mind, there's some things I don't like to see my tax dollars spent on, but having my dollars go to support the men and women that work for our fish and wildlife agencies in North America, you can have my money.
No problem. Yeah.
Stephen, wonderful program. Thank you very much. We'll stay in touch for sure. Hopefully we'll run. Are you going to be at the Toronto Sportsman Show coming up?
Can't do it. We've got a professional conference at the same time. I got to think about changing those dates.
Yeah, it would have been a great opportunity for you to come out and talk to folks and touch and feel and let them know that. Anyways, we'll run into you, I'm sure. Thank you very much for joining us. You take care of yourself.
Thank you. Bye.
Dr. Stephen Cooke, I guess if there is the prototypical scientist, marine scientist, he's the guy.
Yeah.
In the dictionary, they have a picture of him right next to it.
Very knowledgeable, very confident in what he's talking about. Still has, he listens. Yeah. He'll listen to everybody. He watched that video just like we did. He listens to us. He'll listen to anglers. He's an angler, which really helps. That, you know what I mean?
I think that's the key.
It's huge. Absolutely
I don't
huge.
think it's a necessity.
No.
But I think it really is the key because he's already asking himself questions before the experiments even start.
Of course.
Based on an angler's side of viewpoint.
You know what I mean? Stuff that that barbless hook stuff that he was talking about.
He didn't know the rule. We shocked him.
But the stuff about in the hooked in the throat doesn't matter if it's barbless or not.
It's
gone.
What I mean?
So it's interesting stuff.
It's gone. The fish is gone. The minute it goes beyond the outer perimeters, I think it's gone. We've known that, but we've known that since the beginning of time, right? We've always known that.
Yeah, and those fish release properly, or they look like they release properly, but who knows what happens when they get down there too, right? Those fish.
We didn't know then, and we don't know now.
No.
The only thing we know for sure, I want to belabor this point, is that every fish release is a fish that has a chance to live again.
That's right. Now. Even that smallie that's all tattered in tatters.
Be interesting to see what sort of comments we get.
That'd be the best. Flaro's going to catch that fish next year and say, "Hey boys, I caught your smallmouth."
Hey, it was a wonderful episode. I hope that we've cleared up some of the.
That's a huge subject. We could talk for hours on that subject.
Confusion going on about this whole barotrauma thing and science in general. And no, there is no savior out there. No,
Messiah.
And I think we were very kind to that. We did not really jump all over it. Suffice to say that the conditions that the scientists used in that video were totally different than the conditions that one YouTuber used in his video. So you can't even compare those two as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well said.
That's it.
Yep.
What else? Don't forget. Don't forget these wonderful shirts.
That's a bunch of bullshit.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
I believe they're a limited edition, and that they are flying now that they're finally up on the
So
site.
you're
They're
telling me
flying
if there's an order for 1,000 comes in, you're not going to get some
Nope.
more printed up? That's
No, we've got the next one already in line. As soon as these
Dean,
go
can you
out,
hit that button again for me?
That's a bunch of bullshit.
Thank you.
Why is he always
I gotta-
trying to discredit
no,
me?
I want you to make some money. You
Why
you
is he
could use
trying
some
to
money.
discredit me?
I think,
Always.
you
No,
know.
I'm an honorable man.
How
And
many?
I'm telling
What's
you.
what's the number?
I'm not going to give you what that number is, but I'm telling you right now that the next one is already in line and is waiting for somebody to push the button.
Is there a time limit?
Before
they can't get this?
No, it's when they run out, they are out. So if you don't have yours, I would strongly, and because I'm not going to play favorites, I strongly recommend that you get one.
You know I already have one, don't you?
Well, then you might want to wear it every once in a while.
I'm going to wait till summer because right now this is a bunch of bullshit weather right here. I don't like
It's
it.
not.
That's a bunch of bullshit.
This is exactly the type of weather you want to be
Dude, I
wearing.
was
this.
fishing
I
on
know.
Lake Ontario 2
nuts,
days ago
Nuts.
in a boat.
Nuts.
Ridiculous.
Nuts. Anyways, get them while they're hot and get all the other goodies that are on the store and fishingcanada.com. Of course, go to that because it is also the portal, the gateway to your next fishing adventure. And not only adventure. See, folks misunderstand when I say it's the gateway, the portal to your next fishing adventure. It doesn't mean that you go there because you want to book a trip to somewhere.
Ah.
No.
They're taking it literal. Those are people who are taking it literal, right?
Anything. Anything
But
fishing.
they could book a trip essentially
can
through
they ever?
our
Can
website.
they ever?
Absolutely.
Or you could win one if they go to the contest section.
Hello.
We're always
now.
giving away trips.
Might as well bring a Garmin up there that you won too, right?
Well, okay,
You know?
I didn't want to say that.
They
but
might even
now
win a
that-
boat motor and trailer to take it up
Chris
there.
Craft coming up.
Jeez. You know.
That's it. On behalf of the entire crew, Volvo over there behind the camera. Nikki, look at Nikki V
Volvo
today.
looks very, very bored right now. Like he was,
No,
he
he's
was,
fascinated with this whole thing. That's
okay.
don't misunderstand
Okay.
that. Anyways. Nikki V with his headset on looks very.
looks like he's got a headband. He looks like Fleur with his visor
with
on
his
right there.
Headband.
Okay.
And of course, Mr. Dean Taylor
now.
on the board. On behalf of them and Peter Bowman next to me, I'm Angelo Viola. Thanks, folks. Talk to you next time.